Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, every time I start this podcast and I don't have a cold open that has nothing to do with baseball, but something to do with maybe politics, or culture, or just our broad senses of humor, anytime I don't have one of those things, I truly feel so unmoored. Like, what, I'm supposed to just introduce the podcast and talk about the thing that we're going to talk about?
Yeah.
I'm supposed to just refer back to the real episode we did last week and talk about how we have a great conversation coming up with Bradford William Davis, friend of the show and general smart baseball person, about gambling and the state of industry. I'm supposed to just do that?
Do you want me to I can just run through news headlines if you want. You can pick your cold open.
Well, that would be really good, in particular because we're recording this 2 weeks in advance.
2 weeks in advance, so it's not going to be stale.
No, it'll be right on the money.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, these are real news headlines, not fictional news headlines like last week's episode.
I've already lost the plot, but we are back.
Where do you think RFK will be 2 weeks from now when this episode runs? Maybe we could talk about that a little bit. Could he be commissioner of baseball by then?
Stop. Don't put that out there.
Don't put what out there?
Can you be commissioner of baseball and in a presidential cabinet?
What are they trying to make him? Like Health and Human Services?
I don't care. I don't know. Why are you making me talk about RFK Jr. 2 weeks in the future or the past?
Because you're going to be in Europe on vacation, and I'm not going to be able to crack these jokes with you in real time.
No, what you're saying is I am in Europe on vacation right now.
Right, exactly.
As the listeners hear this.
Not as we speak, though. As it's being heard. I've never thought the whole, like, oh, we're recording in advance, the timelines thing, like, that's a level of pulling the curtain back that I don't think podcasters need to do as often as they do.
Yeah.
And yet we are doing it.
Taking
right
great
now.
pains to do it. No, we're back with part two.
Part two.
Of our fictional betting scandal.
Where we talk about the fictional betting scandal as if it were real and talk about what we think would happen.
Right. But then also acknowledge that it's not real, but it could be.
And it might as well be, frankly. Honestly. We invited friend of the show, Bradford William Davis, on to do that. Bradford has covered not a scandal of this magnitude, but he has covered the way that Major League Baseball institutionally responds to things. Such as the way that they handled the baseball controversy, the literal baseball, how there were different baseballs coming around, how they couldn't get their stories straight, how they didn't have message clarity about any of it, how they lied in some places and they were honest in other places, how some people were saying one version of the story and how Commissioner Manfred was holding back on that version of the story in order to try to help save face. You know, it's not totally related to betting and how they would be demanded to respond to a scandal of the magnitude of the fictional one that we came up with last week. But like, they can only be them, right? They can only react the way that they react. Whether it's to a larger scandal or a smaller scandal, they are who they are. Much like Kesha said, we are who we are.
Yep. Uh-huh. No, we had a really good conversation with Bradford about this scandal, scare quotes around it, but also just more broadly about what the sort of burgeoning institution of sports betting means for baseball. How a league might respond to a scandal of this caliber, and also then what? You know, then how do we sort of grapple with that as fans, as consumers of this game? How does that sort of change the path that the game is on? And what does it mean to tie your sport up in something that is so financially beneficial to you and also potentially pernicious to your very consumers?
Mm-hmm. if we swallow too many of our consumers, do we still have a sport? If we mire them in debt, do we still have a sport?
The goal is to swallow 49% of the consumers.
Yes.
So we still have a majority of them.
Yes, correct. This all feels very like housing crisis, by the way. We were truly too far down the rabbit hole in the conversation with Bradford, but like the sports betting, creating people who only want to bet and who aren't really interested in how the baseball game goes. So we're not creating new fans. So there's no longer anything real tying people down to the sport, but they want them to still place their literal money, like take their paycheck and just shove it towards the sport. But if they don't have that level of institutional relationship to it, then it's no longer tied to reality.
Frankly, surprised it took us like 7 years and change to compare Major League Baseball to the housing crisis. That feels like a layup for us.
You can't say for certain that we never did.
I know you're right.
You
I
don't
can't
know that. And neither do I, and no one does. That's the ephemeral nature of podcasting. All right, we're gonna go do part 2 of the betting scandal with Bradford. But before we do, I am Babu Wagner.
I am Alex Baisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. Friend of the show, Bradford William Davis is here. He's here to help us do a conversation about a fictional podcast that we published last week. But really, he's just here because we love talking to Bradford. Hi, Bradford. How are you?
Good to see you both. I'm doing all right.
We catch Bradford here on vacation. Look, Alex, we're interrupting Bradford's vacation for this dumb shit. Like, what's going on?
I know. We're avoiding my vacation so that we can interrupt his.
I was told that this is serial season whatever.
Mhm.
Yes.
But is this serial season whatever? Or
well, many
you
people
guys
have said
bamboozle me once again.
Many people have said we're sort of like the institutional New York Times of baseball podcasting. Like that's how people think of us, right?
Okay.
Yeah, this is our first concept album.
Oh,
you gotta start
true.
somewhere.
Is this the flute album? Did we just put out the flute album? Damn. Bradford, you're here to help us talk about our betting scandal episode from last week, and really just kind of like speak hypothetically about whether Major League Baseball would be ready for something like this. What would happen if something like this were to unfold? And now for folks who maybe don't remember from last week or maybe skipped over last week and are just firing this up because it's at the top of their queue.
Don't do that. Go listen to the last one.
Yes. My first piece of advice would be go listen to the last episode because it will provide all of the details that we are about to talk through here. And because we put a lot of work into it. But I'm just going to do a run through briefly of the details. We put out a fictional episode about a betting scandal last week and talked about some of the ways that it would unfold, the different power players within it, how people would react, an idea of how a betting scandal might start to unravel within the world of baseball. In that, there was a college baseball program in which 2 coaches got ensnared in sort of this pitch tipping scandal, which, by the way, had to layer that in there for the tipping pitches heads. And it then affected 2 players who went on to get drafted to the same Major League Baseball team. And they were involved in hush money payments for keeping it quiet. And it was essentially like fixing a college World Series game. And it didn't get revealed until they were at the Major League Baseball level. And so Rob Manfred, the commissioner's office, the FBI, the NCAA, they had to decide who gets to punish whom and where and sort through all of the very complex details of this scenario. And we've invited you on here, Bradford, to talk about what the hell would happen if something like this happened in real life? Because like, we're not crazy in thinking like it could happen basically tomorrow, right? Something like this could happen pretty soon.
I mean, like, frankly, it'd be crazy not to think something like this is kind of happening now.
Yeah.
And we just don't know it yet.
What was your reaction? We reached out to you. We said, hey, can you do this with us? You graciously said yes. You kind of signed a blank check. Like Bobby gave you the kind of rundown, but we sent you the script ahead of time. Kind of coming out of reading that, what were your first thoughts? Was it like you just said, like something like this could already be happening? Is it like these guys are crazy?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that the most likely place for a gambling scandal is the kinds of settings that you are hypothesizing. A place where there's not that much money in it yet, in the actual income you make from the sport. I guess, NCAA does not pay people directly, but there are NIL rules. So some people can make some money off of that. I would wager that baseball, even through NIL, baseball is not making as much as, football, basketball, or quote unquote conventionally attractive women in women's sports. So with all that said, I bet you there is a opportunity, I think, to bet on yourself, wink, wink. Especially if you don't think that you are necessarily a shoo-in to be a big league star one day. So why not? Honestly, the thing is that this is fictional, but it's not it's fictional in the way that good fiction is fictional, and that feels very real. Like why not take a chance at some riches, or just being able to pay the rent, if you're not one of those scholar athletes, let's say, in the college level, which as they're not there, particularly in NCAA baseball. There are not a lot of scholar athletes per team. Forget the figure. It's like 13 and a half, something like that, right? At least currently. Might be going up soon. There is a clear incentive to kind of work what you can. And I think baseball is a sport that is particularly prime for a betting scandal, perhaps more so than other sports, because it is so much less fluid, and based on discrete events happening. The Jonte Porter thing is probably the biggest pro level gambling scandal so far in our betting age, at least in our, let's call it the betting age of this last 5-6 years, right?
Yeah. Since the Supreme Court ruling allowed states to start legalizing on
right, exactly. Beyond Vegas and the online sports betting. And since then, but basketball is a much harder sport to do that, because there's so many more variables at play that factor into what happens on the court, whether it's a shot, a rebound, assist, a steal, etc. Whatever, all the kinds of statistics that you could be betting on. There's so many more active people in it. You may not even get a ball in possession. You may not get the ball. You may not have the ball in your hand for more than 20 total seconds during your entire run in the rotation. For all we know. When Jonte Porter was putting up those those weird stats with crazy amount of traffic on it, it just signaled everything. It signaled clearly there's something wrong here, which is how the NBA found him out. But going back to baseball, right? Even with pitch clocks, and in college baseball is not affiliated ball, but there is every single event stands on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Strike one, stop. Strike two, stop. It's very easy, particularly for a pitcher, and a little less so for a hitter, but still for a hitter, to simply choose to swing on the first pitch or choose to throw a ball.
There's so much reasonable doubt in baseball. There are a lot of explanations for why something might happen. And I think as we were talking about, where it's these events are so discrete. And also, if we reference back to the episode from last week, this fictional thing that we cooked up was, okay, the strength coach and the pitching coach, they put together a scheme that revealed what pitches and the location of those pitches were coming for the opposite team. Now that's not too far of a cry from what Houston did to cheat and pick up signs in Major League Baseball a few years ago. It's obviously something completely different because it has the whole betting angle. But that's also something that could happen in the routine course of baseball. You could have a tip, you could give it away, and your best pitcher could get blown up in the middle of the College World Series just because he was tipping the pitch. And so it's very easy to sort of concoct a situation like that is intentional, that to fans is entirely imperceptible, which is why so often when I hear, like, if we start to examine, I guess, like the systems of power like in place at the major league level or even at the collegiate level that talk about things like the integrity of the game. We can't ever allow sports betting to infringe on the integrity of the game. The integrity of the game is simply just fans' perception of the integrity of the game. And I think that and part of why I wanted to write it this way was like, I think we were maybe underrating how quickly that can go away. Integrity of the game and how it's being affected by the presence of sports betting isn't a real thing. It's just a perception that fans have because sports betting is affecting the game already. Players are already thinking about fans who are angry at them for their parlays, who are threatening family members because of their parlays not hitting, who the ads are in the outfield constantly. The presence of it is there, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And so to me, like, while the scandal in this case would be like, okay, there are 2 players who might have to get suspended for this or who are involved in a Federal Bureau of Investigation. Like, to me, really, the scandal here is like, this is inevitable in some ways. And I don't know that, I'm sure Major League Baseball has a contingency plan for it, but I would love to see like what that is. Do you think like does Major League Baseball have break glass in case of emergency, this bad thing happened in our league? Because they don't put off that vibe that they do have that.
You would like to think that they do, but when you're around Major League Baseball long enough, it's hard to believe that they that they do too. You went back. You mentioned the parallels with the Astros sign stealing scandal, and we know this through a lot of good reporting. Evan Drellich probably the most prominent, well known, and impactful of the journalists who were really digging into that. We know that MLB was warning teams to stop messing around for throughout the 2010s, not just the Astros. We know about that sign letter of the Yankees. We know about the Yankees Red Sox stuff. We know about the Astros Red Sox stuff in 2018.
The Apple Watch, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was, again, like I'm not saying any of these things necessarily rise to the heinousness of the 2017 team.
Mm-hmm.
We know Eric Kratz even, talked about like the Rockies in 2018 or something. The Rockies, the Colorado Rockies, the constant innovators and all this. Colorado Rockies apparently had, a illegal sign stealing scheme going on. And yet the MLB seemed so flummoxed by the exposés that came out at the end of 2019 that like they felt they needed to offer full indemnity or whatever, right? Like, to all of the players on that team in order to get as much information as possible. And it's like, my brother in Christ, like, how did you not know? Like, or didn't you know? That you didn't know. You still need more? Like, and so I share that to say, like, any competent organization should, but I think you should always assume that institutions that have legally entrenched themselves to be too big to fail, by literally through things like
antitrust
monopoly,
exemption.
Antitrust exemption. Excuse me. Yeah, like institutions that are that have legally entrenched themselves to be too big to fail, are dumber. You'd hope. You should always assume they're like 10 to 20% dumber than you think they are.
I mean, you've covered them not having answers to obvious problems that were going to crop up like within the last 2 years. Like the baseball's changing. They knew that was happening and they still didn't have
the thing your sport is named after. You're
really,
still like we don't know what goes on in there.
They didn't have a consistent story to put out. Like they didn't get the alibi straight before those stories came out. Like you got Dr. Meredith Wills grabbing baseballs, measuring them, and they still didn't know what to do. Right? Like this is an organization. It's like,
I mean, it was notable that the league spokesperson admitted what the commissioner wouldn't. which the league had produced and used multiple baseballs, and except in the interviews when he did, like behind the scenes, but like the spokesperson told me, just going back to the multi-ball scandal stuff that I reported on in the past,
Mm-hmm.
like at the end of 2021, yes, we used 2 different baseballs, but then there was an ESPN profile that a big one on Rob Manfred the next year, where Manfred said, "No, it's always been one baseball." Like, and when I asked him again, he's like, "Yeah, there were multiple baseballs one time." Like, again, like, just message discipline, basic stuff, are things that often fall to the wayside. Like, again, don't be fooled by the suits and the fancy degrees. Like, assume worse.
As fans, when we talk about sports betting and the dangers it might pose to the quote unquote integrity of the sport, it's easy for us to think back on the historical examples that we already have in the sport, right? It was a team that got together that, in part to kind of stick it to their owner, said, "Well, we're going to throw this game," right? It was an individual player, one of the most famous in the sport at the time, who said, "I think I can get away with this." Not necessarily throwing games, but placing bets in ways that I should not have been, right? And it's easy to kind of like comprehend that. I feel like as a fan, it feels very cut and dried. You're not allowed to bet on baseball, and you did. Something tells me, again, as we built out this story, that the truth is often far stranger and far more nebulous than I think we'd like to parse out in our heads as fans. And that it's not just going to be a star who bets on himself to not, to hit the under on strikeouts or something like that. Like, it may reach down to levels that are a little below our radar, like the minor leagues or college baseball, as we've kind of already seen. I'm curious how you think the league can, if at all, sort of respond to this sort of thing. Obviously, they have jurisdiction over minor league players who are beholden to the same standards that major leaguers are. But when it comes to amateurs, it feels like there's a little bit more of a gray area, even though it's no less dire. So, I mean, like, were a sort of scandal to unfold at a college's baseball program, per se, I mean, what do you think the response would look like from Major League Baseball, aside from the kind of like boilerplate, like hand wringing, like, we care about our sport, this is terrible? Like, what is it? What can they really do in response to this sort of thing?
I think the most important part would be a scapegoat.
Mm.
If you have something dead to rights, who can be thrown under a bus?
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating answer. Fascinating.
I think it's kind of simple as that. There may be talk of a probe, maybe a real probe, but I believe that ultimately the goal of it will be preventing liability and protecting the shield, as they say, with NFL types scandals of a similar nature. Who can be blamed easiest and most, as a way of making sure that the commissioner and the 30 owners that employ him look as clean as possible.
Yeah, nothing sticks to them. I mean, Major League Baseball, it strikes me that they are an organization that is acutely aware of how they are perceived, and they are constantly trying to massage that perception. They don't want to be perceived as too regional anymore. They don't want to be perceived as too old anymore and boring anymore. So they roll out something like Let the Kids Play, even though they don't really embody that ethos most of the time from top to bottom in the way that baseball is developed in America. And so, yeah, I never really thought of it that way, but it would be, how many people can you protect by inviting someone to fall on the sword in exchange for not revealing some of the more pernicious hypocrisies of owners just lining their pockets with sports betting money with gambling money, which, by the way, a lot of the talk around when they were saying yes to a lot of these partnerships, it wasn't just about, oh, well, this is going to be a cash influx into the game and we need the cash, even though that was the obvious subtext of all of it. A lot of the talk was, well, people like to bet on sports and it'll make it more fun for people, right? It'll make it more fun for fans. It'll make it more engaging for fans. But really, it's like you're almost backdooring in the virus into the sport by saying we need to fix the code here. Like everybody's a little bit bored. And so we're going to allow this fun, juicy thing, which is betting on our sport, to sort of add a little bit of like an injection of life, an injection of caffeine into the experience. But you're also at the same time kind of undercutting, like, is any of this real? These people are all just like pretending to care a lot about this thing. And if it feels like it could be fixed because money is on the line from gambling companies, which are incredibly powerful, or even just like bookies who are not part of a larger company, but who carry a lot of weight. I don't know. I'm really interested in the idea of like the losing hold of the perception of.
Yeah. And I think in a scenario that you presented, perhaps the most like straightforward way with which to avoid integrity concerns is the fact that it happened. One is that it happened in a college baseball setting first. Second is that because they are players and they are protected by a union, it is an easy place with which to score points against labor.
Mm-hmm.
We, Major League Baseball, protect the integrity of the game, as you just said. Even when our workforce conspires against our efforts to protect the integrity of the game. This message is sponsored to you by Bet MGM. I'm Aaron Paul. Thank you for tuning in. No, like whichever one he does. He's so serious. He's so intense. Have you ever seen? I don't know. Like I just see that it's constantly during Knicks games.
Yes.
Like
yes.
Aaron Paul's, with like this like CGI stadium environment, and he's like, and he's just like he's sermonizing on the importance of getting this bet in. And I don't know.
Fucking Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston, they're available. Call them up. They'll do what you want them to do for the right amount of money. They're cashing checks.
Yeah, man. So that's my take, at least as far at least with in the scenario that you guys conjured, Alex and Bobby. Like, going back to 2020, if you remember, there were two baseball players who got caught sneaking out during the pandemic. They were on the Guardians, and and so MLB. What MLB did was, I should say MLB, but there was a lot of blame on these players, of course, for doing what they did, and that was understandable, given especially given the situation of it being like a pre-vaccine era in our pandemic. And they were on Cleveland, so their teammate happened to be Carlos Carrasco, who was literally in remission for cancer. It's like, what are you guys doing? Knock it off. But there was very little of a zoom out critique of the league, as I recall, in the reception of it, as far as staging games during a public health crisis and messaging it as sort of essential part of American life to have these games, rather than sort of partnering with the effort with which to contain and manage COVID in a better way when people were still like dying in mass, in this country. It was much easier to just kind of like foist blame on the players rather than on the the institution that was quite arguably putting these players at risk anyway by having them play, and then also marshaling huge loads of resources with which to that were needed by true quote unquote essential workers who are using that for sports. There's always an easy individualized kind of like explanation for scandal, the sort of bad apple philosophy and approach and strategy with which to deal with a scandal. But the whole bunch is is the shield, is institutions MLB, and my Bible says that Satan will never cast out Satan. So,
well, it's also like people forget
Requisite
that
Bible quote. Check.
Yeah, there you go.
Check the
That's
box.
like
We did
three
it.
straight episodes.
Hell yeah.
It's like, yeah, a few bad apples. That's true. How does the rest of that saying go? Spoil a bunch, I think. like it is, I think, a really interesting framing that you're bringing up, right? That, and I think you're spot on, that MLB and sports leagues at large, I think, are happy to, like, I don't want to say that Adam Silver wanted Porter to get suspended, but also I think was happy to make an example out of him, right?
Absolutely.
And say, look, this is someone who ran afoul of the guardrails we have in place, and we will not stand for that sort of thing. It's a lot easier to point the finger in that regard, because frankly, if you go any further beyond that, I think you have to start grappling with some like really dire questions regarding like public health and how sports betting dovetails with that, right? Like we are rapidly, I think, hurtling towards, like, maybe crisis is a little melodramatic, but I think maybe we as a society and sports league specifically are maybe not entirely equipped to sort of deal with the fallout of this kind of thing over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's hard because there's no middle ground, right? There's no middle ground of where you say, yes, this is an addictive quality that is impacting members of our, world. And also we should continue doing it with moderation, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to be like, it was one person. We put the gambling hotline at the end of the ad. So like they knew what they knew the number to call.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for that or even a question for that, but it does feel like they are leaning really hard on one side of that debate. And I think you can only hold out there for like so long.
It strikes me like we live in an era of like quote unquote acceptable risk, acceptable damage, that the error bars of what the harm that corporations are allowed to cause, or the management consultants that they hire to tell them where the line is between when they go too far and the public will start to turn on them and no longer maximize their profit. And like MLB and all sports leagues are not unique in this way. They make decisions based on things like that. And so when it comes to sports gambling, there is a reasonable amount of addiction that they are willing to inspire in exchange for the profit. And they probably like have those numbers, like literally those numbers exist in a PDF on a drive somewhere. There is a reasonable amount of scandals that they're willing to put up in exchange for the profit. And there's what I mean to say is like the decision to say yes to this implies that they know those things. They're not doing it thinking that it's going to go perfectly, because as much as we want to joke about them being stupid, they're not stupid and naive to all of this stuff. They know there is a certain level of like cold, clean, nefarious management consultant inspired theology behind all of these decisions that they make. And so the very existence of them saying yes to partnering with all of these sportsbooks all of the time is also a tacit acknowledgement that they're willing to accept a scandal, that it's okay, that it would be worth it to them, and that they would maybe change the calculus depending on the size of the scandal and what it metastasizes to.
Management consultant inspired theology is an incredible turn of phrase. Like I will use that, but yeah, it is holy writ provided by McKinsey or whoever they went to, either literally for an audit or figuratively due to the educational backgrounds of so many people who work in pro sports and baseball come from. They went to them and they kind of doctrinally accepted. Beep boop beep. If we make more money at the end, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If our balance sheet says we made more money at the end, whether or not we are losing more money in the long run because no one likes you anymore and no one believes in you anymore, it's fine if the balance sheet today, says is black instead of red. Like that is the inherent problem with the incredible velocity and apparent lack of guardrails that MLB has left into the online sports business, online betting business, and it will possibly be their downfall because, as you mentioned, it is just theology, and there's no sort of practical grounding or empirical grounding with which to complement it, and that takes into account that the stain isn't worth it because eventually someone else is gonna, someone else with money may not want to own that team anymore because the returns were already earned.
I'm really interested to see what the tipping point is, if it exists at all. And maybe there isn't one, right? Maybe it's just hurtling full steam towards the wall until we hit it. And maybe that's fine. We can all go down together. But, again, like, this industry is a few years old. And for a while, I've kicked around the idea of, like, is this like a bubble? There's billions of dollars being poured into this, right? And leagues are staking, like, their livelihood on it, right? They are latching onto this like it's RSNs, And I don't know. I'm interested your perspective, Bradford, on like eventually you run out of money to bet. But I guess on the other hand, there's always a stooge down the block who's ready to who's ready to win that parlay. If you're
no, listen, dude, you're onto something. Look, my opinion, gambling may be around, but for perhaps ever, because it's kind of always been in our human nature with which to take dumb risks on things. Frankly, it's why we're sports fans. That's why in a very craven way, it's a perfect marriage. But
damn, dead to rights. Like, he's got me dead to rights. Right here on my own podcast.
I'm talking to a Mets and an Oakland quote unquote A's fan. That's not like you're not winning in life.
That's for sure.
Local podcast host found dead in ditch.
If you were to state anything but your sports life on these teams and their futures,
you'd be fucking broke,
right? But there is, first of all, the margins on gambling for the house are quite slim. There's a lot of money being pumped in, and a lot of these online betting startups into crowding the market. I remember when it came to New York, right? How insane the insane incentives you had to bet, right? It'd be bet $5 and get season tickets to I don't know, whatever. I'm being a little facetious, but it was crazy. There was a point where me knowing I don't have an addictive personality when it comes to gambling, I was just I might as well just bet a couple of times and just get stuff, get this free jersey, get the tickets, get whatever, because they're giving it to me,
right.
They are literally just giving me money for playing their game. That's done because they're trying to become, they're trying to saturate the market, and hopefully get enough addicts, enough problem gamblers, essentially, with which to sustain the institution. But the margins are still aren't great. DraftKings, did they just unprofitable or recently? Don't hold me to that. But there are serious questions about the long-term profitability of this. A lot of speculation. If there is ever a legalization of other forms of online gambling, state to state, there simply won't be enough money to go around, in my opinion. God forbid they make online blackjack or something like that, legal in, again, in the same states with which online gambling. People simply can't do that, can't give, all their money to sports, or, even the problem gamblers who like both, they're just gonna give something to sports and some other things.
Yeah.
Like that's just a way having a finite amount of resources individual works. So when that happens, like, will those gambling checks be the same? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I really don't. And so there is a doomsday scenario, in my opinion, where all you have is scandal but no monies.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really good point, because when you go back to like when the leagues were talking about these partnerships and talking about the reason that they should be excited for it, the reason that the average fan should be excited for it, they're like, well, it'll enrich your experience as a fan, right? The vast majority of fans do not bet on sports, like that are just baseball fans. They still just go to the ballpark and watch the games, right? And maybe those numbers are increasing, and that is a good thing in the league's mind, in the betting companies' minds. But honestly, a lot of what happened, right, was like the career gamblers were like, okay, now we'll just bet more on sports, because it's a lot easier and there are more incentives and there are more upside opportunities for me. So it's much like when there was like the whole NFT push that MLB was going for. It's like the people who are going to come and buy your NFTs, it's not like baseball fans who are like, now I get an NFT. It's like NFT fans who are like, now it's in baseball. Now I'll just put my weird little fetish into another part of the world. And so it's almost like you're like chasing a profit that's tied to nothing. Again, it's like tied to the theory that people want to come spend more money on sports betting. But like when that money starts to dry up, or as you're saying, Bradford, but like when there are other places for that money to go to, it's not just line goes up all of the time. We saw that happen with RSNs. And RSNs are a much more essential part of the sports landscape than betting on sports. RSNs are the sports. That's where you see the sports. That's where almost all of the fans consume the sports, And they clearly don't give a fuck about like getting people to come into their stadiums, really. Much like they would rather just like one billionaire buys out the whole stadium every game. They would much rather like one big shark gambler spends a ton of money on the gambling website every game than they are actually worried about like diversifying their revenue streams.
I think ultimately what we're all saying is that there is such an overemphasis on short-term accumulation of money and so little proportionate regard for long-term impact and viability of what it means to get those earnings, get that money right now.
I mean, maybe that was your takeaway, but my takeaway was if I want to take down betting in sports, I need to start my own campaign to legalize online poker playing, online blackjack betting. Like this is you just opened up a path. This is how we do it. And then we just keep doing it. We keep legalizing forms of betting.
So we're all going to law school. We're going to become lobbyists, for the gaming industry to open up blackjack to take down Rob Manfred.
Exactly.
It's
the devil you know.
It's the perfect crime. I love it.
It's interesting, Bradford, that you didn't know that I'm already a lawyer and a lobbyist. That's what I do in my free time when I'm not doing this podcast. I lobby for the gaming industry.
Wow.
Okay.
You are a profound wizard at so many things.
Lessons we've learned here. It's not good. It's not getting better, and we don't know what's going to happen. Anything else on our betting scandal podcast here, Alex or Bradford? Anything else that you feel like we've missed? The one thing that we maybe didn't explore in full, but like that I think Tipping Pitches listeners in particular probably have like a lot of opinions on already is what you mentioned, Bradford, about like their ability to pin this on labor. And I do think that it would turn into a sort of like, well, we're trying to suspend these players, but that pesky union is getting in the way of allowing us to suspend these players. And that would be a whole sort of wing of discourse that like we would care a lot about and largely like fans wouldn't really give a shit about, I think, for the most part. But that was interesting to me, and I felt like I should mention that. But aside from that, I mean, anything else? I mean, like if there's anything else that we feel like we haven't covered, then I'm happy to hear it. But really, we just appreciate you going along with this absurd concept that we literally concept pod that we asked you to come be a part of.
No, I was excited that you guys were branching out into even more theoretical and out there kooky ways of exploring and complaining about this game. So,
we ran out of all of the ways that we knew how to complain about the game, so we had to literally invent new ones.
We made our own, yeah.
Like, the vibes have been kind of like all right, despite like all the Oakland stuff, in this year, at least to me. I love how, as things are like basically going good, we have yet another clean sort of home run milestone chase, like with Judge, and Ohtani's doing crazy things once he's been, he no longer has two jobs, only one. So he's like, balling out in special ways. Like, it's been great. So I love how with a nice summer, you decided to create like, but what if?
Don't get too comfortable.
It's like you don't know us.
Don't get too comfortable. Yeah, right. Very deep, very much in the Tipping Pitches ethos.
You are a very good sport for entertaining our somewhat delirious ideas. And who knows? Maybe we'll have you back on when this all happens in 6 months.
Hey, Bradford, where can people find what you're working on? Anything exciting that you want to point people to directly?
Yeah, I kind of freelance all over these days. Sadly, I still operate an active Twitter account. That is my addiction. Not gambling.
I think you mean X the Everything app, please, as it's referred to by the Tipping Pitches House Style Guide.
Yeah, it's got porn, it's got Nazis, it's got everything. it's got me. It's got me, Bradford William Davis. No, so I'm on Twitter. When I do have big drops, and I will have some pretty soon, that's where that's likely where you'll find me at this point. I'm not gonna plug my LinkedIn. So it's gotta be Twitter. BWD, but I'm sure you could put that in the notes or whatever.
We just wanted to make you say it out loud.
That's a mouthful to explain on the podcast. That's where I am.
Bradford, as always, thank you.
Of course.
All right. Thank you to Bradford. Thank you to you, Alex. Man, this was exhausting. This was hard to do. There's a reason we don't do this all the time.
Mostly because it was a lot of work finding the voice actors, honestly.
Right. And they didn't come cheap.
They did not come cheap. Jesus Christ. Talk about a union that needs to be broken. I kid. No, this was a lot of work. And I want to give you your flowers for not only, creating the the broad strokes of this script, but also putting it together in a way that actually is coherent in a way that maybe most of our episodes are not.
You got to see the window into like real producer Bob.
Yep. I'm sitting there reading lines and you're like, do that one again. Just say this word again.
Again, thank you to Bradford. It's cool that we have friends that will come and entertain dumb shit like this. It's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
I feel bad that it was on his vacation, but maybe he needed like an hour to talk hypothetically about the power institutions of power in the sports world. That's what I might need on vacation. That's what you might need on vacation.
Exactly. Hey, dude, call me up.
No, I'm not going to be doing that.
Okay.
No.
That said,
not
if this scandal,
not because of respect for you, because of respect for your partner for life.
She will appreciate that. Yeah. That said, if this scandal does break in the next 2.5 weeks,
I'm playing the fucking lottery if the scandal breaks.
You said I'm doing more gambling if this happens.
Something supernatural going on if that happens, frankly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You don't mess with fate. You just ride it out. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm told. I don't know. That's what I'm told. It's in my bloodstream somewhere. My grandfather was a big gambler. He used to bet on the fucking horses, and he used to play the scratch-offs every day. And he won big many times. He was a lucky man.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it is in your blood.
Perhaps I'm being reactionary to it because I'm afraid that I'll be too great at it, I'm afraid I'll win.
Gotta keep yourself humble.
Yeah, exactly.
The books will never see you coming.
Catch them by surprise, right?
Right. You walk in the door and they're like, our worst nightmare. God damn it.
They throw a hood over my head and bring me to the basement and beat me up. He knows exactly how many strikeouts David Peterson is going to get every start. How does he do it? Thank you for listening, everybody. If you like what you heard, you want to support what we're doing here, You can go find more. Patreon.com/tippingpitches. A couple different tiers gives you a few different things. You want to reach out. You have more thoughts about how a scandal like this would unfold. You want to add some nuance. You work for a sports gambling company, and you've found out that something like this has happened, and you would like to reveal it to the media anonymously. tippingpitchespod@gmail.com. Or you can call, and we can put your voice through a voice modulator, 785-422-5881. Thank you to Steve Sladkowski of Pup the Band for original music featured in this episode. That's just the intro, the normal intro. I didn't use Steve's music for the rest of the episode, but I'm just going to thank him at the end of every episode because it's cool. And we'll be back next week.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping Pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!
Yo.
What's up?
I love how I could walk in on you guys and you're just like giggling amongst each other.
Yeah.
That's like a deep and abiding friendship.
We were trying to come up with names for the players involved in the betting scandal, and I was like, the internet is just fucking over, by the way. So like you can't Google like name generator because it just brings up a wheel that spins a wheel and tells me Corey Seager. I'm like, I'm not looking for the names of players who already exist. I want a random name.